Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever.
Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host and head practitioner, Shannon Callery. And we've got an extra special guest today. We have the other practitioner in our practice joining us today too, Brendon McCarville, who has been on once before, but never all three of us have been on. So welcome to the podcast, and super excited that all three of us are on today.
Yeah, I can't wait to have this conversation. It's going to be a good one. We're going to be talking about more energy stuff today. Brendon has a lot of different skills and trainings in this area. So yeah, it should be a great conversation.
Yeah, super excited. So today, kind of like the overall theme, and we're going to get into a lot of aspects that go into this, is just self-sabotage. And we're going to talk about this in like the context of healing journeys, of going through healing protocols, but also, you know, I see this as a huge piece as to why a lot of people have such a hard time in shifting habits and making like some longer lasting changes. And so we're going to dive deep into this. And like, one, obviously I wouldn't have brought Brendon onto the team over a year ago if I didn't think she was great. And I think just all the feedback that we've gotten from clients and all the work that she's done, like even better than I could have even hoped. So I'm so excited to dive into this. And yeah, let's talk just like generally speaking, like what is self-sabotage first, and maybe like how do we start seeing this start to pop up?
I think everybody probably on that's listening to this podcast has experienced self-sabotage in some area of their life. It happens whenever you decide to make a change, you set a goal for yourself, you want to do something new, and almost immediately resistance pops up because you're stepping out into an unknown thing. You're wanting yourself to do things differently. So it starts getting really uncomfortable, and that's when the subconscious mind kicks in and tries to keep us safe. And so it'll have us pull back and not actually take the steps that we know we should be taking. It makes that really difficult. So I feel like the times it pops up the strongest are when you're trying to just start something brand new. And then also when you're on the verge of like a really big, deep level of healing, it pops up again. And it may pop up here and there, like throughout any kind of journey, but like those two times are when it's the hardest, just from my experience working with myself and clients.
Yeah, we have both definitely experienced that. I still experience that. I mean, I feel like that's part of the growth in healing journey in general. And we say this to our clients too. Whenever you're feeling very resistant to something, it usually means that this is like, we need to put a spotlight over that and start to look into it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, it's so easy just to think, oh, I'm not doing it good enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. I need to do it all perfectly. Those are all self-sabotage patterns. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, this is just the subconscious mind coming in, again, trying to protect you. It kind of acts like a thermostat. So you set your thermostat to a certain temperature, and in the context of a healing journey, like your subconscious thermostat is okay with like this level of healing and this level of like living your life. So as soon as you start to step a little bit outside of that, the thermostat will bring it back down, or it goes both ways. But it's just trying to get you back to that set point where you're comfortable, not necessarily like happy, loving life, but that's what's comfortable and that's the known for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece is that, our brains and our egos like familiar. And it's all about protecting us and safety and keeping us, in a lot of these patterns because we know what's going to happen. Like if we're going through a healing journey, and we've been doing whatever we've been doing, we know how to handle that. We know how to even if we don't feel good, like we start to learn how to feel bad and like manage and cope with that, even though that may not be what we want. It has now become very familiar, which means it feels safer to us. And that piece just like is so, I think, so important to understand that, like, one of the things I always say to myself is like, thank you, brain. I appreciate you for protecting me. And I'm making a different choice right now. So just wanted to let you know, brain, that we are doing this. So yeah, I think that's super important. So, like if we look back at like trauma patterns, at, like maybe earlier patterns, like how does a lot of this stuff kind of start? Like how is this connected to like who we are, who we believe we are, what we think may benefit us, like things like that?
So the subconscious mind gets programmed before the age of 7. Some people say it starts at birth. I personally think it starts before that even. But before the age 7, the human brain is basically in a hypnagogic state. So you're just like accepting everything that's coming in from your environment with no discernment, because you don't have any yet. Your brain is just not set up that way until after age 7. So you don't have any choice about what you're taking in as a thought, a belief, an experience. You're just unconsciously making decisions because that helps you feel safe so that you can survive and continue on with life. So through no fault of your own, I mean, we all have these patterns. And it's just, you form your identity in those years too. Who you think you are, what you think the world is like, who you think God is, what we're doing here, all of these like big, like high level, deep things, determine how you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you be willing to say, because this is kind of like my opinion on this, and just real quick, for those of you who are watching the video, we did lose Megan and she'll be back shortly here, hopefully, but we're going to keep going. Generational trauma. So if you are someone who believes in this, I do think that this plays like a huge role here too. So, because you were talking about like, some of this does, these thoughts and these traumas form before we're actually even born from the generational trauma. Is that kind of where are you in alignment with that, I should say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's not like, just to give like a brief background on that, because I know everyone is not super familiar with that. Maybe you are. And if you are, that's awesome. But generational trauma, it just means like looking back at our lineage, different things that, happen to past family members. And this has to do with like our soul. We could go really deep into this, but I'm not going to go that far in. But pretty much like things that happen to our family members, for example, like something that happened to my mom or my grandma, those are going to be like generational traumas. And again, you can go really deep into this, but basically what it's saying is like some of these subconscious thoughts and patterns are kind of being formed along the way before we're even born yet. And that's where some of this stuff can come in.
Yeah, and they're passed down epigenetically, if you're familiar with epigenetics. But if you do want more information on that, there is family constellation therapy is a really fascinating thing to go into. There's also a book called It Didn't Start With You that is fascinating. And there is a Netflix series that you can watch that kind of dives into that concept. I think it's a Turkish show, though, so it's subtitled and whatever, but interesting.
What was the name of the book so I can put it in our show notes?
It Didn't Start With You.
It Didn't Start With You. Mm-hmm. Ooh, okay, that sounds like a good one. I haven't read that. I'll have to look into it. Sure.
Yeah.
With you. Yeah, but those are some resources just to... Honestly, I feel like that's a good place to start with some of this stuff too. Not if you're someone... If you're just getting into like... Well, let me ask you this, because I feel like what's the best way that you would recommend for people to start identifying that, hey, maybe I am self-sabotaging, or maybe I need to start making some shifts in this area?
Well, I think a lot of us are aware of it because we all have these ideas that I should be doing more or I should be doing better. And when it comes to health, I should be eating a certain way. I should be exercising a certain amount. And there's some reason, or, you just can't make yourself do something that you know you should be doing. So that's self-sabotage. And like one of the first ways that I like to think about it, and this kind of relates back to that generational trauma piece, is identity. So based on who you think you are, what kind of person you are, that will determine your behavior, because your subconscious mind won't let you behave in a way that's not consistent with who you think you are. So if you think that, oh, I'm just a chronically ill person, you're going to keep repeating behaviors of a chronically ill person. But if you start to shift that to be like, well, I'm experiencing chronic illness now, and I have been, and there's a possibility that something could be different. Just opening up like a little window of possibility can be enough to start shifting things in the right direction.
Yeah. And that's considered too, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more at some point, but like the brain rewiring or rewiring the subconscious, like starting to focus on the feeling of how do you actually want to feel. That's kind of what this is.
Exactly. And there's this study that I just love because it's so cool, but it was done in the 1970s. And there was, they put these 70 and 80-year-old men in a hotel, and they outfitted the hotel with all kinds of things from the 50s. So they only had 50s TV shows playing. They had like posters and different things from that era. So this was like 20 years before the actual time of the study. And during the week that the men were there, they were telling them, speak as if it's the 1950s and you're doing what you did then and you're enjoying life then. And they took, they did blood work. They did all these, they took all these measures of health before and after. And in just 1 week, these 70 and 80-year-old men appeared younger. Their hearing got better. Their eyesight got better. Their memory, all kinds of things improved just because they were acting as if they were 20 years younger.
That's incredible. I hadn't heard about that study before. I mean, I believe in all of this stuff. I've participated in it, used it many times in my life. Haven't heard of that study, but that is amazing. And that really just goes to show how strong focusing on that feeling in doing the actionable step as well can how powerful that is. That's insane.
Right. And obviously not all of us can seclude ourselves for a week or a month or whatever to really ingrain this new identity. But you can start surrounding yourself by things that can reinforce this identity that you're trying to build. So decide what it is and just seek out maybe other people, other stories of people like you who have healed, who have achieved what you want to achieve, to let your body or let your brain know that this is possible for people out there in the world. Maybe it's possible for me too.
Yeah. And I think this can be really hard sometimes too, because if we're constantly being surrounded by people who remind us of maybe the identity that we don't want to identify with anymore, that's where maybe we are starting to change or set boundaries or end relationships with certain people. And we have to, I like calling them expanders, looking for these people that maybe are doing the things that you desire to do or feel or whatnot. But some of this stuff can get really tough when we actually have to start separate ourselves essentially from what we're comfortable with, all the identity stuff that you're talking about, and then moving and shifting into the new.
Yeah. And I mean, it definitely is hard. And sometimes it's kind of required for a period of time just to kind of pull away from the known parts of your life, from friends, even families sometimes that kind of have you in a certain box, just so you can build that identity for yourself. And once you do go back into those situations, you won't be like a baby deer just trying to learn how to walk and be super wobbly. You'll actually be able to stand on your feet and be a little more confident and not be pulled off center as easily.
Yeah. And I've had, this conversation is so relevant for me. So I was born and raised in Michigan. I've been gone for 4 years now. And in those 4 years is when I did some of my major shifting and healing. And part of that, now that I'm on the other side, I can see that part of that was because I had to get away from everything that I had ever known, all the family patterns, the trauma. I actually had to like physically separate myself from all of that in order to really dive in and do this deep healing and see these deep shifts. And it was very, very difficult. And it was challenging. It was a test, like every time I went back home. And I love my family. Like I'm very close with them. But I was also aware that like some of the things that I want are just like different than what it's been in the generational trauma and all that stuff. So yeah, some of this stuff can get really hard, but especially I see this on our list here, the resistance piece. Let's dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, this one is super, super common. Just the idea of pushing against what you don't want. And we think this is a good thing to do because like, I don't want that thing, so I'm going to push it away from me. But when it comes to healing in particular, I mean, everything really, but, just by focusing on that thing that you don't want, you're continually giving it energy and you're continually feeding it. So it's going to keep it in your experience. So, if you are experiencing that resistance, like we have a client who has been dealing with mold illness, and my conversation with her, she was saying, I hate this mold. But also in the same conversation, she told me what an incredible journey that she's been on since getting sick and all of the personal development and growth that she's experienced and how she likes herself so much more now than she did before. So not to say that the mold was a good thing. Like I wouldn't wish that kind of thing on anyone, but you can make meaning out of something like that. It took her on a journey that she wouldn't have gone on otherwise. And she likes herself better. She feels like she's a better person on the other side, but she's still pushing against the mold. And, I was encouraging her to just try to release that a little bit and find some gratitude for that mold. Because again, wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it has helped her to grow in a really positive way.
Yeah. And I know what specific client you're talking about. And we actually just talked about this again last week. And, I have another person too that we're working with who has mold toxicity, and, mold toxicity is a really, really tough thing to deal with. And it brings up a lot for, almost everyone that we work with. And this person in particular has really, really intense certain symptoms that she's having. And when she first started, there was one main thing that we were focusing on. And then once we got a little bit of a hold on that, it was almost like instead of taking the time to like sit in it and be like, okay, like this one thing that was really, really bothering me, like we've got it under control a little bit for now. She like almost kept jumping from like negative to negative, like symptom, just like focusing on, okay, well now this is showing up and I'm focusing this. And we kind of had to have this conversation like, all right, same thing with this other client with the mold, like focus on these good things that are coming up. Not everything is healing at once, but like look at all these good things that are happening along the way in your healing journey. And I get it, like that can be really hard to do when we're not feeling good, but ultimately that's what, in my opinion, is going to help like change your subconscious along with other things and kind of get you to that other side. Just like focusing on that feeling of like the good parts.
Definitely. And the brain naturally has a negativity bias because that's a survival mechanism. So we want to be aware of things in our environment that could be dangerous so that we can avoid them, which is natural, helps us survive. And it also, like Shannon just said, it keeps us from seeing the good things. So a lot of homework I give clients is just to write down, like, what are even the tiny little wins that you have? Acknowledge those for yourself. Bring them to your awareness so that you can bring in some positive and you're not just constantly focusing on the negative and the resistance and all the things you don't want.
Yeah. And I actually had a therapist tell me one time that we were talking about different studies that showed when you're doing that, when you're actively thinking about like positive things, like the gratitude practice, studies have shown that anxiety can't be present in your brain at the same time that you're thinking about like those, the positives, the gratitude and whatnot. So yeah, that is like a really powerful piece to this.
Yeah. And it can be really frustrating at the beginning because I remember the first coach that had me do this, I was completely stumped. Like nothing came to mind when they asked me, well, what's good about what's been happening? And I just sat there like, nothing, like nothing's good. But it's just, it's just that subconscious again, kicking in, protecting us.
Yeah, not allowing us to see what we know is actually there. But yeah, and I also feel like that's part of like a trauma response too, is like when someone's asking you, like, because I've been there, what are the good things? What do you need for yourself? Kind of along the lines of that. And yeah, it's really hard. Like if you're sitting there like a deer in headlights, which I absolutely have been before, can't answering any of those questions. It takes time to get to that point. But I will say, no matter where you're at in your journey, I truthfully feel like that's a tool that anyone can use at all the time, because we all are, what's the word? We all have stressors. There's all days where we're going to be anxious. Maybe we have something that frustrates us. And that is a tool that we can use is, hey, let me pull myself out of this. Like, what are the things that went well today?
And, if you're in a spot where it is really difficult to think about positive things, just find neutral things. Like what happened today that wasn't a big deal,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, maybe you had a snack and no flare-up. That was just neutral. I mean, you could see that as positive too, but there's a lot of neutrality you can focus on during your day. We do a million things we don't even notice every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as like tools that can help with this too, I think journaling, is something that can be great here, just to actually like see it on paper and help see the patterns.
Yeah, definitely. I love journaling for all of this stuff, really.
Yeah. But yeah, when you are feeling some of this resistance, so obviously we just talked about journaling, that's something that you can do. Any other tips or suggestions on like what else can we do to help deal with the resistance?
Yeah. So what I'm going to say next, you do have to be in kind of a regulated state to even get there. So make sure you've got some kind of nervous system regulation, some time in nature, something where your system isn't super activated, but then turn toward the thing that you're resisting. Like turn toward the mold, turn toward the flare up, and just be with them. Like usually if these things keep popping up, which most of the people that we work with have chronic issues, so it's popping up over and over and over, it probably has a message or something that it's trying to communicate. And you can't get that message if you're constantly ignoring it and pushing against it. So just try to turn toward it and see what it has for you. It may be a message. It may be emotion that needs to come up. It might just be that you need to sit there and like put your hands on your belly if you have stomach issues, or, just think about what would you do to comfort a small child that's feeling a lot? Do that for yourself.
That's good. I love that. And that really pulls us into this second piece here, like focusing on healing too much. I see this happen a lot, and this is very easy to happen in the holistic health space because we're constantly being bombarded with like so many different ways to heal through the internet, social media, the news, whatever it is for you. We're constantly being shown and told different things that we can do to try and make our health better. So sometimes we can get stuck in that like just repetition of like constantly, maybe it's trying new supplements, trying different exercises, like whatever it may be. And we can really get pulled into this like constant rush of just trying to heal ourselves. And in reality, what we really need to do is, again, you kind of have to be in somewhat of a regulated nervous system state to get into this. But if we can slow down enough to hear ourselves, that's all that we need sometimes, is to just like slow down and actually listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we say focusing too much on healing can be a problem, but in reality, there is a time when you do need to focus on your healing a lot. But then once you have a foundation built, once you have, a good nutritious diet, once you've got some movement going, some kind of nervous system regulation practice, then it's time to start thinking about the rest of your life. Like, why are you trying to heal? What's on the other side of that that you really want and start, for one, see if you can feel what that would feel like in your body. Like, what does that future version of you feel like? The healed version. What are they doing? What are they doing that's different than what you're doing now? And just like start making a list, brainstorm about this, and find small ways to start incorporating those things into your life so that you're not just healing, you're actually starting to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big thing. Just because we can get stuck. Oh, Megan's back. We let everybody know that you're popping in and out. I don't know if she can hear us or not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super sorry. I am having the worst internet issues I've ever had anywhere all of a sudden today. So yeah, my apologies if you are watching this.
That's all right. We're continuing on with the conversation and you can just chime in whenever. But yeah, so getting stuck in the healing like pattern, I guess we can call it. And we've all been there. I feel like everyone who's been through a healing journey has been there because it's just so hard to not constantly focus on like what can we do to heal ourselves and make ourselves feel better. But yeah, what Brendon was saying, like we actually have to stop and focus on that feeling or else we're kind of just going to be in this repetitive motion.
Yeah. And I did come across an interesting study that was looking at blood work and how that's affected by the emotions that people feel. And one marker that stood out to me because it was, I don't know, it just really stood out. But like the acidity level of the blood is affected. You know, you can change it by diet, supplements, all these things. But the thing that affects it the fastest and the most effectively is feeling joy. Yeah. So there are all kinds of physical things we can do to support the body. And also like emotional and energetic things can be super powerful.
Well, yeah, and it really reminds me of like, you know, all the studies they've done on people with like the early childhood experiences test and, you know, people that score a 2 or higher. And then they look at lab work, you know, a decade, 2 decades later, and just like inflammation markers across the board are higher. And, you know, like, and it doesn't really matter. It's like, that's such a common thing. So we know that trauma, these emotions like play such a big role on our actual physical health. And we can see that even through lab testing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's cool is that there actually is studies out there on all of these things that we're talking about. They may not be like well known and well shared, but they're definitely out there. Like we know that all of this stuff that we're talking about when it comes to like the energy piece and the trauma, this has huge impacts on the body. And that's why we specifically talk about this part so much in addition to like the supplemental healing, the liver support and all that. Like this is a huge piece as well.
And
right.
I'm going to
you can do.
I was going to say, I'm going to apologize in advance. There's just like one thing I wanted to mention here. And once again, I apologize because I know I'm missing stuff. But you know, like, you know, a big thing I think that we see, and I fell into this too, of like believing that we're gonna experience things or have to suffer certain things because it's quote unquote in our genetics or in our family history. And you know, like, having that like over connection, you know, for me, like I almost had a light bulb moment when I was pretty young and realizing anxiety and depression, like someone told me that there was a genetic component. It was probably a therapist. And I was like, oh, well, like everyone in my family is like on medication for this. So like, that's just something I'm going to have to do. And then, you know, fast forward to like a decade plus later, realizing like, oh, like, you know, maybe it has something to do with our gut health or lifestyle or the fact that, like, we're all carrying around the same generational trauma and, like, none of us have processed it. Like, maybe that's why, you know, like, we all have these similar things. And, yeah, that was, like, a real, like, eye-opening moment for me of, like, understanding how much power I really have in my own health, in my body, and how I feel and what things may or may not come up.
Yeah, and there's a statistic, I think it's like less than 10% of conditions are actually genetic. the majority of them are actually epigenetic, which means they're determined by environmental factors, which include your thoughts, your beliefs, your chronic stress, your past trauma, all these unresolved things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Megan, I think you did pop out for a second when we were talking about like the epigenetics and like the generational trauma, but we did dive into that a little bit and, you know, just let people know, like, we got some good resources we're going to put in the show notes. We definitely dived into that because that is certainly a big part of this.
Yeah. Well, sorry. And thank you for listening to my story, even though it was not appropriate timing.
You're good. So what are some things then that we can do when we are, you know, focusing too much on the healing part?
Really, it's just about finding, again, like looking to that future version of you that is healed, that's living the life you want to live, and just start making decisions that they would make, doing things that they would do, even if it's just like, you know, if you want to travel a lot and you're, you know, if you're sick enough to where that's not really a possibility, go explore your city. Like the place where I live, there are so many museums and tours and things that I haven't done, and I grew up here, you know? So you'd think I would know, but I don't. And there are just little things like that you can start doing to make it feel like you're moving toward that version that is healed, that's doing what you want to do.
Yeah, I love that.
So it very much, I know I'm trying to like make sure I don't talk over anyone. Also like realizing like, is my internet still like a real big issue? So, you know, just like trying to not happen. You know, it really makes me think of, you know, like manifestation of like, you know, a big piece of this is certainly like, yes, aligned action. And how do we embody this feeling, you know, the feelings, the energy, the essence of the life we want to live? And, you know, there's so many like small pieces that go into this. And I think also, you know, Shannon and I've talked a lot about this on other episodes about like filling up our own cup. And, you know, I think like even for many of us, you know, step one is like, what even fills up our cup? And like trying to figure that out and you know, just incorporating more of that, even if it's so small and just, you know, like for me, water, you know, like water. I just like, I'm so connected to water and I don't have a bathtub anymore. But like, can I go sit by like there's a river 5 minutes down, you know, a 5-minute walk away. Like, can I do that? Can I go, you know, like where can I go just like be near water and even just like sit near it and watch it and hear it? And, you know, that for me is like a big thing that just like automatically kind of shifts my energy.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a client right now, and I actually had also went through this myself, but just like in a very uncomfortable state, healing from mold, it's hard to go out to eat with friends and kind of just like do fun things essentially. And she is missing that like sense of community and maybe some joy and fun to go along with that. And we had actually talked about like, okay, this particular person just does not do well going out to eat at restaurants right now. So we talked about what about like having friends over to your place and like making a meal together instead of like having that pressure to go out and do something with everyone. So again, sometimes it helps to talk about these things too with other people so you can get other ideas, because when we're really stuck in that like negative thought process, like, oh, I'm stuck, there's nothing I can do, it helps to just bounce ideas off of other people. But yeah, there are definitely things that you can do to help find the feeling that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of you just said something that kind of leads into the next point. The next way I see this showing up for people, the self-sabotage thing, is doing all the things you think you should do instead of trusting yourself and living a life that is more aligned and authentic for you. You know, I definitely did this for years and years. You know, I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, went to college, got the good corporate job, got an MBA, all these things. And obviously that didn't work out for me. Otherwise I wouldn't be here on this podcast. But it made me really, really sick. And the last year that I was in corporate, I had major gut issues that whole year. And I did, you know, I have many subconscious reprogramming modalities. I did all of those and things would improve a little bit. I did all the dietary things. I did all the supplements and things would help. And then it would come back. And so this is like self-sabotage, but showing up in my body because I wasn't confronting the things that needed to be confronted. I wasn't living authentically for me. And the week I turned in my notice for that job, everything cleared up.
Wow.
Yeah. So sometimes you have to take those scary action steps, to actually heal some symptoms.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And another thing that's coming up for me really strongly as you were talking, and now this has now been coming up for me for almost 10 minutes since I came back on, of like, I think a lot of people fall into this category of, especially with social media and the amount of information that is out there, and especially if you're chronically ill, like sick, you're probably not doing a lot. You are probably spending more time on your phone. Comparing yourself to others or looking at other people's lives, like maybe people who are a little bit further along in their healing journey, and being like, I'm going to do exactly what they did, and then I should be all fixed and all healed.
We might have lost her. We could see you, Megan, but we can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Just having the most issues. So what? Yeah. Apparently there's weird energy I need to clear, going on with me right now. But so yeah, comparing yourselves to others, like having these feelings of jealousy of like, like this person went through this and this is where their life is now. So I'm going to just like do everything that they did and everything that they talk about, versus while some of that can be valuable, we're all different and we all need to look at our own stories and what is real for us and what is our truth? What do we feel like we need? And sometimes it doesn't always make logical sense. And that, I think that can be very confusing, kind of as we go into our own healing journey too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I had to do when I really got serious about different parts of my healing journey was unfollow people on social media that I actually at one point thought I looked up to or like wanted to do things the same way that they did. And I thought that it should look that way, until I realized that no, that wasn't the case. It was actually like me comparing myself, and I needed to separate that myself from that. And that happens with a lot of people. Yeah, I think that's a big thing, is like just maybe taking a break from social media when you're doing some of this bigger healing work, or just like, unfollowing some people. But we really have to tune in and start to listen and focus on ourselves and just get comfortable with like, what am I hearing that I need to do, instead of comparing ourselves to everyone else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, comparison on social media is such a big deal. Also, a way that a lot of people kind of shut down their own internal compass is working with practitioners, people who are experts. Like we are all nutrition experts, and, all of us do other things as well, but we're not an expert on your body. You're that expert. So, like we can offer all kinds of suggestions, but you're the one that has to implement it. You're the one that has to feel it and live with it every day. So learning to trust that, and that you are part of the team too. You just don't have to do what you're told. You have to be involved in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are some other ways that we can start to do this, like small ways?
Really just like starting to tune into what you want day to day with very small choices. Like, do you want a certain kind of tea this morning? What do you want to wear today? Like, small, less consequential decisions can kind of build that muscle. And I'm a very kinesthetic person. I know not everybody is, but one thing I really like to do is just feel into my body. If I think about wearing this shirt today versus a different one, does this one make my body feel expansive? Does it feel light? Versus something else. oh, maybe it makes me feel a little contracted today. Maybe it doesn't feel quite right, like something's off. That's one way that some people can experience it. Other people have like maybe a guttural, like yes or no kind of sensation. There are lots of ways you can experience that, but just starting to be aware of what that is for you. Like if there's a food you love, think about that food, notice what happens in your body and in your mind. And then if there's a food you hate, think about that, what happens in your body and your mind. And that can kind of be your yes and no, so you know what that feels like for you.
Yeah, that's good.
A great tip.
There's a book. It's the emotion code book, and they teach you in there how to do like the self sway test. I know not everyone's all about that stuff, but that is also like a good way, I think, if you learn how to do like the self sway test and actually like do it, practice it, get good at it. That's a way to help your body like stay in check and in tune with yourself as well.
Yeah, muscle testing is great, and it does take practice. So again, with these smaller, inconsequential decisions, that's the best way to practice doing that.
Yeah.
I want to go back to one thing that you said. I just want to emphasize this. And it's like being a part of your own team. And, for us, like we want to see people every week for the first 3 to 6 months. We want to actually like communicate with them. We like to see them. We like to talk to them. And the one of the big reasons is, one, obviously we can get more out of seeing someone, talking to someone than we can out of, like a little written checking kind of notice. But also, all of us are experienced enough in just the coaching world that, if something doesn't feel right, like we don't want to do that with someone. And we don't have just like, if you start here, this is your cookie cutter approach. This is, what everyone does, obviously general outlines of things that we do and everything. And it doesn't work for everyone. We have to make these adjustments and things. And if you are looking to work with someone, I'd say in anything, I mean, I've had business coaches like this who are very cookie cutter, like whatever it is, you have to be a part of your own team. And if you only are going to be told, if you're hiring someone and you're only going to be told to follow this quote unquote cookie cutter approach, like big red flag right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And this, I feel like this has shown up so many times with clients, like not even in like this supplemental part, but and we have slightly talked about this before as well, but you get to a certain point where like we've done all this stuff, but maybe you need to dive deeper into like the trauma piece. And like, we can tell you different things to do to start to do it. But like, ultimately you are a part of the team. You're the one who really has to dive in and do that stuff. Like we just can't do it for you.
Yeah. And healing is not a linear process. And I know for me, there are several times where I've done a protocol, reached a plateau, and then I had to find something else or dive into something else and do that for a while. And then I would hit a plateau. And so we have this idea that healing is like this straight upward sloping, line. And it does not happen that way at all. I really wish it did. It'd make things so much easier. But, if you do hit one of those plateaus, it might just be redirecting you. Now it's time to take a different approach, focus on something a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the other ways that self-sabotage can show up?
Well, whenever you're noticing that kind of pattern pop up, one thing you can think about is like, in terms of a gain or a loss, like what do you lose if you break this pattern, if you fully heal, if, what do you get out of being sick? So what do you lose if you heal? It might be a community. There are a lot of communities around chronic illness that can be really validating and you can feel seen. And that's an important thing that you would lose if you heal. It might be support, attention. You might feel special because people have to like wear kid gloves when they deal with you. And it feels like you're getting more attention that you maybe didn't get before. And I will say these are all hard things to look at. These are like, there's a lot of shame that comes with these patterns. So if it does feel really hard, know that that's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. These are all just ways that the subconscious has of keeping us protected, keeping us safe, getting us what we need in order to survive.
Yeah, these are definitely tough things to look into and start to think about. And it can feel really uncomfortable, which is kind of the point here is we have to get uncomfortable in order to grow out of our old patterns. And, easier said than done, but it is the truth.
Yeah. And along the lines of that discomfort, like what will you have to face once you heal? What will you have to do in order to heal? I mean, for me, it was like quitting a corporate job that I had been at for 12 years. So very known, very certain, safe, comfortable, all of those things. But also, I remember sitting in my cubicle thinking, if I have to stay here another year, my soul is going to die. And so my body brought that to light very clearly. So I had to do something about it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's big stuff.
Yeah. So, this can be like boundaries, having hard conversations, making big decisions, like changing a job, moving, changing partners, like so many things.
All the things you just listed are all things that we have, like the three of us have all been through.
Right.
So like,
Yes.
yeah, all that stuff. And it's like jumping off the ledge. You get to a certain point where you're like, all right, like I can't keep doing the same thing. Like it's time. I have to make this huge shift. And yes, it does feel very, very uncomfortable, but learning how to trust along the way is going to help out a lot.
Yeah. Well, and getting support. Like that's what we are here for. There are so many coaches out there, so many practitioners that want to support you. You probably even have people in your life, friends, family, acquaintances even, that would be willing to support you in making these changes. So, that could be an important step too, is just finding one person at least that you can talk to about these things that can support you and figuring out what is a tiny step toward that scary thing that I need to do.
Yeah. Oh, we cannot hear you, Megan. Uh-oh. I think. Okay, we lost Megan. Hopefully she'll. There. Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay. I'm going to say this one thing and then I'm just going to be done talking. But now I lost where I was going with that. What was I talking about? Oh, asking for help. So asking for help just by itself can also be a really big deal for many of us, especially many of us who grew up and we didn't have anyone that we could really count on or ask for help, or we were told that it was not okay to ask for help. And I think sometimes like that is a big piece of our own healing journey of like learning that we can't, or maybe we shouldn't just be reliant totally on ourselves and, having not necessarily like total reliability, but being able to ask for help, being able to support people, and having people be able to support you without guilt, or the shame and things like that. I mean, that's a really important part of life. We're not meant to operate in isolation. We're meant to operate in more of a community setting. So I think that's an important piece too.
Yeah, and keeping these things hidden or like just running in the background by not confronting it. I totally lost my train of thought with where I was going with that. But it keeps it keeps the pattern going. It keeps the shame in place. So shame can only live if it's not being witnessed by another compassionate person. Sometimes it's enough to witness it yourself. Usually it does require another person for you to actually like bring that stuff up that feels hard, that feels scary, like you're a failure, not perfect, not enough. And somebody else can just be there, witness that, and reflect back to you like, hey, you're human. We all feel this. It's uncomfortable for all of us. None of us really know what we're doing,
Yeah, we definitely need those safe safe people. If we don't have that, it makes it so much harder to heal too. And sometimes we can find that if you don't feel like you have any safe people around you that you can talk to about that stuff or just relate with, sometimes we can start to find that in maybe listening to like a podcast or reading a book, just like something else to have that connection with that we're not getting from other people.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Because, sometimes in reality, we don't have that available to us. In addition, like just journaling, again, bringing that back in, that can help too, because that is getting it out of your head and onto paper where you can see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And then let's talk about some of these, like these core beliefs too, that come along with all of this.
Yeah. So core beliefs are what you believe about yourself, the world, spirituality. God comes into this too. Who or what do you think God is? What do you think your purpose is? What any of our purposes are here? That forms your core identity and determines how you navigate your life and the decisions that you make. So when you can start to think about, like, who do I think I am? What do I think I'm here to do? You can start to either rewrite those beliefs and repattern them, or, just become aware so that you know exactly what you're doing instead of just letting it operate on automatic in the background.
Yeah. And this is also where too, having some of those, I used the term earlier, like expander, people's like seeing to believe, finding people around you that have like the same things that you want, or the feelings, whatever, the lifestyle that they're living, whether that's like financial or health wise, whatever it may be. That also comes into play here as well, because again, if you're not surrounded by what you desire to be and feel, like we do need to let ourselves see that it is possible in order to kind of change some of those core beliefs.
Yeah, definitely. And, often the things that we see and admire in other people are things that we actually have inside of ourselves that we're not allowing ourselves to be.
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
I know we're pretty much out of time here. Any other last thoughts? Anything else you wanted to share or talk about before we wrap up?
None of this is your fault. I feel like a lot of this can get kind of heady. We can overthink it. But just like have compassion for yourself. All of these patterns were created before we had a conscious choice in them. And now it's just, we have to take the reins and the responsibility to create what we do want going forward. And there are a lot of little ways to do that. And all of us would be happy to help anyone with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. At least what I heard, what a great conversation. And thank you all, including me, Brendon and Shannon, for being patient with all of my technology struggles here today. And as always, please like, subscribe, follow if it resonates. 5-star reviews really, really mean the world to us. And thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.